Sooner Nation, Longhorn fans, welcome to episode 144 of the Bevo Podcast, the only podcast exclusively dedicated to covering the greatest rivalry in college football, the University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma. I'm here with my man Kevin Miller. I am John Whitson. Kevin, the University of Texas looks to bounce back against the giant slayers that are the Vanderbilt Commodores. This will be your first road trip in SEC play. You are going to Nashville, a la Nash Vegas, where Vanderbilt, I'm not sure if you know this, has owned the University of Texas in all-time matchups. Have you seen the record going into this collision in
what is it?
Nashville?
1-5 or 1-8? What is it?
3-8-1 is Texas's record against Vanderbilt.
Hey man, they used to put in work back in the day.
The last iteration of this matchup occurred in 1928. It was a humdinger, and I think what we can take from that is absolutely nothing. That was 96 years ago, Kevin. 96 years ago that you played these guys. It's changed a little bit, I would think. You know, the advent of the forward pass and, two platoon football, things such as that. However, this is a pretty interesting matchup because Vanderbilt is playing with house money, nothing to lose. They're not a bad football team, obviously, having beaten the likes of Alabama, followed it up with a good win against their rival Kentucky. They are ranked for the first time in who the hell knows how long. And you get to go there coming off a tough loss, not only on the scoreboard, but you get beat up a little bit physically. Andrew Makuba, questionable at safety. Are there any other injury concerns? Did you escape Georgia physically unscathed outside of Makuba? Where are your thoughts at as we head into this matchup?
Yeah, like you said, it's an interesting matchup. I think it's good to come off a loss and still have a team that can challenge you, right? I feel like the guys will be motivated and ready to bounce back from that tough loss. The more I've had to think about the Georgia game, we weren't great. They were really good, especially defensively, right? They had a lot of motivation of their own. It was kind of a bit of a buzzsaw, right? They had a ton of motivation coming into the game. They had a great game plan. And they just really got it rolling. I really feel good about our defensive performance, and I think we'll bounce back offensively. Looking forward to it.
Vandy, despite being ranked in the top 25, they're 95 in total offense. You guys are 15 in the country. That ranking is out of like 131 teams or whatever. They're 39 in total defense, which is actually pretty good. However, you guys are number 1 in total defense, even after having played Georgia. About the only stat that they have an advantage of you on is time of possession, where they're 11th in the country. You guys are 77th. But it's not like some dramatic number. I want to say it's like 33-29 or something like that. So on paper, let me remind myself of the spread. On paper, the 18.5-point spread feels about right. But it's not. It's not the eye test, though. It's not the eye test. It's not what we've seen, though, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of the way they play. First of all, they're not afraid of anybody, right? And that's kind of led by their quarterback, Diego Pavia. No fear at all, so they won't be intimidated. He's from New Mexico. He started off at New Mexico State and transferred to Vanderbilt from there. So apparently he was a New Mexico State wrestling champion. So
yeah,
you know how those guys are, right?
Yeah, they're nuts. They're screws are loose.
Exactly. It certainly seems like that. Ready for a fight at all times.
Yeah, it's all the weight control really messes with their brain and kind of creates a kind of an unhinged, unstable situation. But he seems to be controlling it the best he can. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a guy who's ready for a fight. So, and the way they possess the ball, they run the clock down on every snap. So they lead everybody. I think they lead the whole SEC in time of possession. and they're very efficient. I think they're like 28 out of 29 in the red zone
Is it
so far this
i-
season.
is it just a power run game with a little bit of pass spread in, or what are we looking
Yes,
at in
and it's
terms of
like
their
almost like this power spread option
kind of
type
a
deal.
la K State?
Kind of
I
like that. Yeah, it's really interesting. But then, they run some play action and they'll take deep shots off of it. So
okay.
they'll kind of lull your safeties and stuff in to stop that running game, and then they'll throw it over the top. And they have capable receivers too. They got a really good tight end. Their tight end, Eli Stowers, he's from Denton Guyer. I think he was there before Jackson Arnold was there, and he started off at A&M. He was a quarterback at A&M. Ended up moving to tight end. He transferred to New Mexico State along with Pavia. He was there with Pavia, and then they all came to Vanderbilt. And he so far has been arguably the best tight end in the conference so far.
Other Texas ties: Cedric Alexander, averaging 4 yards a carry, is their primary running back from LBJ High in Austin. Was he ever on Texas's list, or is this going to be an opportunity for him to give them some payback for snubbing him?
Yeah, I was not familiar with him during the recruiting process. I don't think he was on the radar for getting an offer at all.
I hope that comes back to hurt you guys, because that seems like it always comes back to hurt Oklahoma. Anytime we
Oh
play
my
a
god.
team from Tulsa or even remember Kansas last year? It's like
Oh
those
yeah, with
guys,
what's his name? Highshaw.
yeah. Oh my gosh, those guys drool when they get a chance to kind of stick it to their home state that didn't recruit them.
Well, we
So
dealt with this in the Big 12. Almost every opponent, they all had
yeah.
guys. There's probably 100 players in the state that are good enough to play at Texas, and you can only take 20 or so.
Uh, what's the worst matchup for Texas against Vanderbilt?
I mean, honestly, I don't know if there's a horrible one because I mean their offense is really good and they're really efficient. But I love the way our defense has played all year, and Georgia was no exception to that. The issue with them though is maybe their short passing game might try to put our linebackers in conflict, and it can be frustrating for opposing teams because they do just enough to keep the ball. It's not quite service academy, but they almost have that same mindset where they'll run it for 3 yards, run it for 4 yards, let the clock run down, run it for 3 yards, pick up a first down, and they'll just keep doing that. And then once they get into the red zone, they're so efficient that they'll score. They're going to score in the red zone. You get touchdowns and field goals at worst. 28 or 29 so far on their red zone trips. And then before you know it, you've barely had any possession, and it's in the fourth quarter, and you're in a close game. And that's why I think Bama was so frustrated playing against them. Their defense isn't great. Bama was able to score well in the second half, but they would have these long drives, and they would do just enough to keep moving the football. So I think it's the frustration of their offense in that heavy possession that they like to do.
Um, the other side of the Boomer Bevo podcast, Oklahoma's hearing that description of the Vanderbilt offense, and though it doesn't sound explosive or high flying or the greatest show on turf, it sounds absolutely awesome. I would kill for an offense that is 28 of 29 in the red zone. I'd kill for an offense that gets to the red zone. I'd kill for an offense that picks up first downs. Speaking of that, it might not have been broken on the last episode of the Boomer Bevo podcast, but it was definitely predicted that the University of Oklahoma and Brent Venables would let go Seth Luttrell as offensive coordinator. He is promoted or assigned co-offensive coordinator Joe John Finley the play calling duties. He has elevated Kevin Johns, who was an offensive analyst, into the position of quarterbacks coach and I guess co-offensive coordinator, which I think is weird. I don't know why we keep having co-coordinators. However, that's the plan going forward. OU fans see this as a stopgap until the end of the year when Venables can make a true coaching search. The problem for Joe John and company and the rest of the offense is when you look at Oklahoma's schedule, we have Ole Miss this week, where currently we are a 20.5 point underdog, the largest underdog Oklahoma has been since 1997, a la the John Blake era, which has been referenced multiple times on this platform. And then following that, we do have Maine, which God only knows, but hopefully we just take care of business. And then it's nothing less than Missouri, Alabama, and LSU to close out the season. So I don't know what Joe John can do to hang on to the job, if anything. Or is this truly just a stopgap, get us through the end of the year, and we're starting this thing from scratch? What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I think it's a stopgap to the end of the year. You just couldn't keep going on like this. When you look at the film against South Carolina and you see multiple times where Bauer Sharp is blocking Kyle Kennard or Dylan Stewart one on one, it's just nothing was getting better. And I feel like
Unforgivable.
despite
Unforgivable.
the injuries at wide receiver, you still have guys who are capable of making plays with the ball in their hand, and you're not finding ways to get those guys the football, right? And then, so a change had to happen. You're building up to have a player revolt at this point. If things just kept going the way, not literally, but you're just gonna lose the team, right? They're gonna
Yeah.
quit at some point. You run that risk, right? The defense is gonna start. I think it's already happening a little bit. You get a little bit deflated, although they did play pretty well against South Carolina given the circumstances. But you're going up against better offenses coming up, so you have to get something from this off. You at least got to pick up first downs to keep the defense off the field and move the football. So this had to happen. But I think honestly, you need to go external. No comfort hires. You got to do a legit search and find somebody. Find a young up and coming guy who can reignite the program like Lincoln Riley did in 2015.
There's talk about the UNLV coordinator
Brennan
uh,
Marion.
with the go-go offense. I don't know. And of course, the hot name right now is the Indiana coordinator and what they're doing offensively, a la 56 points against Nebraska. So I think that there's some options out there. The problem is, well, not the problem. I guess the reality is what's going to happen to the existing staff. So at Oklahoma, you have an existing staff of coaches on the offensive side of the ball that fans and players like. Okay. I think they've each got their own set of issues, but largely they are liked and respected by the fan base. A la Bill Bedenbaugh, DeMarco Murray, Emmett Jones, um, whoever else is on that side. I'm losing track. But right. So those guys are really liked, really well respected. They deserve some criticism too. The offensive line is just god awful. And whether that's because of injury or lack of recruiting, lack of depth, some are saying lack of NIL money. I want to bring it back to that because kind of still question that thought. Then you got DeMarco Murray, who, Javante Barnes has become our primary back, who still is yet to break the 4 yard a game average. I think he got 4 yards a carry against South Carolina, which is by far his highest of the year. But Taylor Tatum's been less than impressive, I think, because lack of touches. It looks like Sawchuk might have been hurt against South Carolina, but he hadn't given us anything all year. So there's criticism directed at that way. Emmett Jones, we love Emmett Jones. Unfortunately, none of his guys are, healthy.
Yeah, it's kind of incomplete for him. You get to
Yeah, it's
incomplete
like,
grade.
what's the guy supposed to do? It's like, so my question is, do most offensive coordinators bring in entire new staffs? Or is there a situation that you can envision where a new coordinator comes and says, hey, these guys can stay, they're great recruiters, but this is a little bit different philosophy?
I think it depends on the staff. Venables can say, hey, I'm keeping the staff I have, though, when you take the job. So take it or leave it, basically. Sometimes coordinators are adamant that they want to bring somebody with them. When Texas hired Sterling Gilbert back in, was it before the 2016 season, Charlie Strong was the head coach. And he was like, hey, I'll come, but I got to bring Matt Maddox, who was his offensive line coach, with him. He's like, we just really work well together. The system works better with him coaching the offensive line. He knows what I want, and so they made that happen. So it would really just depend on what Venables will allow and just what he wants to do, right? I mean, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a complete offensive staff reset for OU. But with anytime you make a change like that, you risk potentially losing players who are on the team who love that coach. They might follow their assistant coach somewhere else if they get another job. Or of course, with recruiting, you might lose a recruit, a running back
Yeah,
recruit
that's
who just loved DeMarco Murray. But here's the thing, though, man. Venables has to make the best move for the entire program because it's getting to the point to where he's going to be questioned next. After this hire,
oh
it's going to
yeah.
be all on him. You can't fire another coordinator. You don't usually get chances to do that when you're only in year 3. You get one mulligan with it. Herman used his and it ended up getting fired. Same thing with Charlie Strong. Mentioned that there. So you only get one chance. So he has to make this hire correctly because all the pressure is really starting to build.
Well, I don't know. Kevin Johns is now the interim offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. I think that's a positive move. The problem that I see on offense, and it's hard to believe that it's Seth Luttrell isolated, right? Like isolated to one person and one person's completely, is just the complete lack of progression or improvement over the season. And instead, almost a seemingly regression. And I talked about this last week. You're seeing teams like a la Notre Dame look better than they did at the beginning of the year. LSU, my God, LSU looks like a world beater all of a sudden. You're seeing USC regress. You're seeing OU regress, while other teams are going the other direction. And I just can't believe that's all on Luttrell. And so that's why I kind of want to advocate for a new staff. But at the same time, I do like all the guys that are here. And you do run that risk. It's just a delicate balancing act. But I kind of am with you. You only get one shot at this. I think you got to trust whoever you bring in to make the changes he feels necessary to make.
Correct. Yeah, and you got to bring in the right guy. Now, I think when and this is under Bob Stoops, when he brought in Riley, I believe he just brought in Riley, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. That's correct.
But you guys weren't having those kind of issues or the kind of issues that you're having right now under Heupel that you're having. It wasn't that bad. I mean, it was bad under Heupel that last year, but I don't know if it was like this.
One of the big discussions in Sooner World right now, as it relates specifically to the offensive line, is NIL. Okay, they're saying that Oklahoma is not committed enough to NIL to recruit the big names and to get who they need to get along the offensive line and other positions. You follow recruiting as close as anybody. I kind of follow it just from a ranking standpoint. I don't get into like each individual kid. But since Brent Venables has been here, we've been a consistent top 10 class in the country. How do you reconcile a statement that says Oklahoma is not spending enough on NIL, yet we're still top 10 in the country? Can those two things be true at the same time?
Well, here's the thing, right? When we were both in the Big 12, if you're top 10 in the country, that's great. Now that we're in the SEC, if you're you can be top 10 and 8th in the SEC. So it's who you're recruiting against. So you can still be at a pretty big talent disadvantage. You have to get higher. Now, I hear what people are saying, but in this class alone, the current class that's committed, not signed yet, but you got just on the offensive line, you've got the Michael Fasusi, who's a 5-star, and then the Ryan Fauci kid, who's a borderline 5-star. I think that kid looks great.
And we had EPL last year, right? Was EPL a 5-star or a high 4-star?
Yeah, he was a high 4-star too.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just going over the whole roster, but I feel like the offensive line recruiting has been as good as it's ever been. I think that's been a fair criticism of Beatonboss. The recruiting hasn't been great. It seems like he doesn't enjoy it, but it's something you have to do. You have to continue to recruit at an extremely high level. because Georgia's doing it and Tennessee's doing it, Alabama's doing it, and Ole Miss is doing it. So you can't get left behind. My issue, though, I think, in criticizing Brent Venables is the management of the roster so far. I look at it and I just don't feel like Oklahoma should have a roster that looks like this in year 3, especially at the offensive line position, right? I don't know if Beatonville is doing a bad job. I know he's been able to work with things, maybe not elite recruits, but the way things have worked out, I know maybe the Lincoln Riley departure might be partially to blame for this, but I just look at the pieces that you have, and it just doesn't seem like the pieces that you've had in previous years. And when you have to portal multiple offensive line, it's just hard to build
And
a
the problem,
unit.
I think you can make the argument that we've missed. Like
Maybe so, yeah.
we were
In the
excited.
portal, yeah, you can miss in
Yeah.
the portal, yeah.
I think along the offensive line, the Spencer Brown kid out of Michigan State, people hate him. I don't know enough. I don't know how we can hate him any more than we hate anybody else in our offensive line, because I think they've all had their struggles, but they really don't like him. The Hickman in the center, he's been hurt. It's really hard to judge his performance. Apparently,
I think he's
still
good when he's healthy.
He's still playing hurt, I guess. So I don't know. It's just really weird. Look, if we're truly not competing with NIL, I just find it hard to believe. And I'll tell you what, dude, you are getting the SEC money. You are getting Jordan money. You are getting money from just multiple avenues. We don't have Texas money and we don't have A&M money, but very few do. Very few do. But man, we're up there, and across the board at other positions, we won big with Dominic Williams last year and other things. I find that we're broke or we don't treat NIL aggressively. It's just kind of a false narrative.
Yeah,
I don't
seems
love
like it's a low hanging fruit almost to
Yeah.
blame for things going wrong. Yeah, because you put out a lot of money for that. It's hard though with NIL because you have to find the correct balance of paying high school guys, paying portal guys, and then of course taking care of the guys who are already on your roster. And it's just a weird balancing act, and I think programs are still figuring it out, right? This is all pretty new to balancing all that. You just have to make the right decisions because, these kids have a lot of people in their ear when it comes to the decisions that they're making.
I hate to compare us to Texas, but I guess for me, the biggest frustration on the offensive line, since that's kind of where this conversation is kind of all boiled down to, is when you talk about roster management and roster whatever, in Sarkisian's first year, they were all freshmen. Everybody was a freshman.
Yeah.
They were all freshmen. And so you look at it, you're like, well, there's going to be struggles because they're freshmen.
They were freshmen in his second year because they signed those guys after Sark's first year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. In his second year. They're all freshmen in his second year. And so you could make arguments, right? You could make excuses. You could do whatever. But now you're seeing the fruit of that come through. I know they just lost to Georgia, and it's easy to say, well, yeah, but they didn't. Look, nobody blocks Georgia all the time.
Yeah, especially this version that you got of Georgia. We hadn't seen that version of Georgia all year.
Yeah.
We just haven't. So
let's all just pump the brakes on that narrative. Texas has a good offensive line. And you see it now, and so to your point, when you talk about roster management, I don't know what it's supposed to look like in terms of management. However, I see what other schools have done, and it just, man, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. And so, okay, anyway, let's get to this game a little bit for Oklahoma. In other news, as if Oklahoma doesn't need other news to deal with, Jackson Arnold's named the starter. Okay. Michael Hawkins, I don't think, did Hawkins get in against Temple?
That's a really good question because I was wondering if he already. I'll look it up. But go ahead.
You look it up while I make this point. You're right. We know he got in against Tennessee, Texas, and Tennessee, Auburn, Texas. I guess it doesn't matter. It's in 4 games, even if it's just Tennessee, Texas, or Tennessee, Auburn, Texas.
We know he's been in 4, which would still consider him to be a red shirt. But if he's played in 5, then the red shirt is gone.
Okay, so has he played in Temple? Did he get snaps in Temple? Can you tell?
I'm actually working on that now. Give me 1 second.
All right. So I find that
Yes, he's played in 5 games according to Soonersports.com. So no red shirt for either quarterback.
both quarterbacks are saying the right things. Both quarterbacks are indicating their commitment to the University of Oklahoma. In this day and age, I'm not trying to be cynical or pessimistic. I just find it hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that quarterbacks of this level, despite what they've shown, partially or not their fault, despite what they've shown, I find it really, really hard to believe that two quarterbacks basically on the same trajectory want to compete for a job next year at Oklahoma. It just rarely happens anywhere. It doesn't happen in Alabama hardly anymore. It does, you know what I mean? It just doesn't happen.
Completely agree. I mean, it's worked with Texas because it was never competition. Everybody knew that Arch was not going to be.
Look, Arch is an outlier on so many levels. He doesn't need the money. His family is the king of rational thought and development and taking your time and all of the things. His uncles all stayed for all 4 years in college. All of those things exist in the Manning world. I think but you look at Ohio State. I don't think we got to go much further than Ohio State. Ohio State is as good a program outside of Alabama or Georgia that you can get, and they struggle at quarterback, maintaining quarterback continuity year after year, right?
Correct.
And so, I don't know. And so, you asked how you manage it. Last time you asked how you manage it. I don't know how you manage it. I think you continue to play both quarterbacks. But I almost wonder if you get a couple drives unless you catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. It's hard. It's just so hard to get into a rhythm. You're always looking over your shoulder, not just for turning the ball over. Obviously, that's different. But just hey, if I have a bad throw, if I go 3 and out, am I going to get pulled? Looks like we might have lost John here for a second, but yeah, with this OU quarterback situation, I feel like it was mismanaged. John and I talked about this after the Tennessee game, and I asked John if there was a quarterback controversy, and he said not to him that Hawkins was a guy, and I thought it was a bad idea to bench Jackson Arnold. He was just a young guy going through the growing pains that all young quarterbacks go through, but instead you start Hawkins, looks pretty good against Auburn, but then he starts going through those young growing pains that all young quarterbacks go through and have to go through before they're good, and now you're back to square one, basically. You basically have wasted Hawkins' red shirt. Jackson Arnold's red shirt is gone, and there's no progression as to any one of them separating themselves from the other one. Both guys have just had 3 turnovers in a pretty big game.
Honestly, since Tennessee, and you said this, I tried to build on the 2 plays. We talked about the 2 plays at Auburn. We can all remember those 2 plays. 1 big run, 1 big throw. All right. I tried to build on that as momentum. Like here's momentum. Here's somebody that can make a big play when it's needed. Here's somebody that'll spin into the end zone and try, get confidence for the team and get the team to rally around them and all those things. Outside of those 2 plays, you're basically looking at the same quarterback since the Tennessee game.
Yeah.
It's the same quarterback. Upon further review, how much of those 3 turnovers, were Hawkins' fault at the beginning of the South Carolina game? That can be debated based on having Bauer Sharp blocking the 2 best defensive ends in the country and how those affected those 3 plays in particular. But it doesn't really matter. He was, even outside of that, he hasn't been moving the ball. Obviously, he did nothing against Texas. Nothing. So I don't know. I just wonder what the rationale is. Like, I'd like to know the rationale because did Arnold earn a starting job with his play against South Carolina? The dude went 50% completion.
Yeah, I mean,
1 touchdown. One sustained drive. Like it's really hard to say, oh man, he went unhurt.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I mean, I think you can do a few more things offensively with Arnold just because he's just been there longer. He just has a year of experience. Just as far as being in the system, just being there, he's just played more football. He's just older than Hawkins is. But again, there was nothing from Jackson Arnold that said, "Oh, we definitely have to put him in." So I don't know what they're basing their decisions off of. Just like the decision to bench him. He had a rough game against an elite Tennessee. Tennessee's been really good defensively, and it's been all year. They were great against Alabama and Jalen Milroe on Saturday.
I will say this though, Kevin. If one can compare turnovers, okay, and faults of those turnovers, like whose fault it was. The 3 turnovers Jackson Arnold had were more of his fault than the 3 turnovers Michael Hawkins had. All 6 came at awful times. For it to be on the first play of the game, for it then to be on the second play of the game, and for it then again to be on the pick six, like those were terrible too. They were really, really bad. But like on a scale of whose fault was it more, Jackson Arnold, hold on to the ball, bro. Like hold on to the ball.
Yeah, the fumbles were, especially the first one. It's like you're just going into traffic. It wasn't like he got popped, from the blind side or something. Just bad stuff from him. I just didn't know if it was enough for him to lose his job the next week. It was bad. I see him getting pulled that game, right? Like Sark pulling Quinn temporarily. I get that. If you're not seeing it, if something, but I didn't think he had done enough to lose a job, or I didn't see enough from Hawkins to think that he should be the starting quarterback as a true freshman going forward. That was just my thoughts when it happened.
Whatever. I don't know. It doesn't matter. All right, we're playing Ole Miss
on the road
in the Grove. 20.5 point dogs. Couple notes. Ole Miss has a very interesting history in the SEC. Okay, they've only won, and I'd say only because they've been around forever. Since I think they're one of the founding schools in the SEC. They've only won 6 SEC conference titles. Okay, their last conference title. You want to take a guess when their last conference title?
I have no idea. I mean,
1963.
I was about to say it's probably long before either of us started watching football.
That's 61 years ago. 61 years ago that they won their last conference title. Their Ole Miss as an institution is really, in my mind, kind of the embodiment of the Old South, which is just, kind of wrought with all the things and all the connotations, from flags that used to be flown at football games to songs that used to be played to 30 for 30s written about integration. And so Ole Miss is kind of, it's kind of a bridge from the past to the future. Maybe some ways good, some ways bad. Do you feel that about Ole Miss, though?
100%, yes.
And
100%, yeah. And they still do those chants, don't they?
I think to an extent
they're probably discouraged from doing them, but I'm sure there's always going to be a group that's still going to do those kind of things.
They don't play Dixie anymore. And I'm not an apologist. I'm not one of these guys that says, let's erase history. I think history occurred. The Civil War happened.
Yes, of course.
I think it's important to remember that the South lost.
Yeah. I mean,
sometimes gets lost.
Some things don't need to be celebrated still.
Yeah.
We don't erase history, but
I don't think that it needs to be misremembered that somehow the Confederacy won, because they didn't. But I just feel like Ole Miss, more so than the other schools in the SEC, I feel like Alabama has done a good job modernizing themselves. They've created a culture where you don't think Old South when you think Alabama. You think
modern
New South. You think New South. You think all of the things. Ole Miss just doesn't have that, or whatever, has kind of had a hard time doing it. Their stadium is named after Vaught Hemingway, which is 2 people. Vaught is their coach from, I believe, the 50s and 60s that led them to most of their success. Hemingway is not Ernest Hemingway, like I thought it might be. It is named after a judge who donated a lot of money back in the day. So Just wanted to clear that up for everybody. Of course, Lane Kiffin, who I think both of us kind of like Lane Kiffin, right? We need characters. We need characters like this.
We need personalities in the sport, because the further we get along, the fewer of them they are.
100%. I forgot that he was the Raiders head coach. Do you remember him being the Raiders head coach?
Yes, and he was in his mid-20s, late 20s, something like that, or was he
Yeah,
early
I think he
30s?
was like,
He was
no, I think
really
he was
young.
like 28 or 29.
I
What did you?
don't know what Al Davis was thinking there.
Okay, so that was a failed experiment. We know what occurred in Tennessee. I read Clay Travis's book, uh, where um, he follows Tennessee through an entire year of football, and it ends up being Philip Fulmer's last year. So then he has an epilogue in the paperback version of kind of the tumult that was the Lane Kiffin season and everything that kind of happened. And it's just I don't he should I think he's matured a little bit, but man,
Yes, I do.
he was an immature dude. Like that
He
was
was. Yeah, he
I
was.
still question I still question why Tennessee ever hired him.
Correct. I mean, desperation, man. You're trying to, you see this young guy, the offense looks good, and you're desperate to try to keep Alabama's about to get their run going. Florida is at their absolute peak under Urban Meyer, and you see,
Yeah.
and he's a pretty younger guy, right? Urban. I mean, he's not in his 20s, but he's still
Yeah.
young enough to relate to players and stuff. And I think they were trying to keep up as best as they can because I guess they saw what was coming with him and Nick Saban at Alabama.
He goes to SC. Again, tumultuous years.
And again, when he left, him leaving Tennessee was similar to Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma.
I think it was worse.
Yeah.
I think, and I hate Lincoln
He was only
Riley.
there
I
a
hate
year,
the
though. Yeah,
he was only there a year. He was only there a year. He didn't. He was. But in the same kind of sense, like Clay Travis made the point that these old schools, especially the SEC, had titans of coaches that people looked up to for years and years. And Philip Fulmer was one of those. Wins a national championship, is just kind of an icon. Same with Bob Stoops. And that you hire this new era of coaches that lack that same level of loyalty, good or bad. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe you're looking for the production versus the loyalty, the wins versus the culture, whatever the case may be. This case didn't work. He gets fired on a tarmac at USC, which I still think is one of the great moves in all of college football. Gets the car wash with Nick Saban at Alabama, gets the FAU job. Now he's been at Ole Miss since 2020, has really stabilized that program. And they have been a very competitive program under Lane Kiffin, 34-15, almost a 700%, almost a 700 winning percentage. But still, never really competed for an SEC championship. He's got a lot of good recruiting. Their offense is going to be good. Jackson Dart. I don't see a scenario where OU wins this game, but I'm wondering if the new blooded offensive coordinator, Jackson Arnold, getting a second chance at quarterback, if we can at least make it competitive, because the last two games have been anything but.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem for OU fans is, losing sucks, period. But when you're not competitive, that's when you really start to lose people when things start to fall apart, right? And I want to see the motivation of the team. Does the coaching staff change give you a spark? Even if it's not sustainable for the rest of the season, at least on this game.
Yeah.
You get a spark. And what's the game plan going to be? What is this offense going to look like that it's going to be different from what it's been this whole season, especially these last few weeks?
What
John Finley, now he's never called plays, right? I don't think he's ever called plays.
Did he call plays in the bowl game when Levy left? Is that his only experience for
Latrell? Was not Latrell not coming in that game? I thought he called that.
He was Latrell. I don't know that was officially hired by then. He was still an analyst.
Yeah, I think they might have. For some reason, I remember him calling the plays. Could be wrong.
Well, those plays sure don't look like any plays we saw.
No.
Anyway, I don't know. The one thing about Latrell,
real quick, it's and this whole deal with Latrell was kind of weird to begin with because Latrell's an air raid guy, but I think Venables wanted to keep the Veer and Shoes of
Yeah.
that Levy was calling, but that's not his thing. And I don't know if Latrell knew it well enough to keep it going the way it had been going. So it just
Well, I
wasn't. It
mean,
didn't seem like it was a good fit overall.
Joe jo-
If that's what he wanted him to do,
Joe John's been under Heupel before. Like
he
he's
has.
worked on Heupel's staff.
Hmm.
And so maybe Joe John is a little, to your point, maybe that's a positive to think about. Maybe Joe John's going to be a little more versed in the offense, a little more comfortable with it. We all know the deficiencies at tight end. I think that's what's marring Joe John's elevation is we see the deficiencies at tight end, both in the blocking game and in the passing game. Sharp just hasn't been the guy that was advertised. There's been some sparks, but really not that.
You see the athleticism pop at times, right? You can see
Yeah,
it.
but then you see the drops pop at times where you're like,
Right.
God bless, bro.
Yeah.
Hold on to the
And I
ball.
think he's having a bigger issue, going up from Southeast Louisiana to the SEC. I mean, that is a monumental jump in competition. It's not even going from Group of 5 to the SEC.
We will pick Oklahoma. We will pick Texas. But let's look at week 9, Kevin. It's actually a very freaking good slate of football. Like, it's really pretty good. We're going to have some good games to pick. Starting on Friday night, Syracuse at number 19, Pitt. Pitt is a 5.5 point favorite. Boise State at UNLV. UNLV is a 3-point home dog. Rutgers at USC. USC is a 14-point favorite. Anything about the pre-Saturday games jump out to you?
Yeah, I'm not particularly. I mean, UNLV can do some things offensively that may give Boise State some trouble, but it's Ashton Jeanty, and I don't know how UNLV can slow that guy down, right? And as far as Rutgers and USC goes, I mean, how much motivation are those players having? Hopefully, they're still in it and handle themselves well. But USC just has to win that game, man. It's not they might, even though it's not a flight, they might fire Lincoln Riley on the tarmac.
Syracuse and Pitt's interesting. Pitt's still undefeated, not getting a lot of love, but they're undefeated, 6-0. So it's going to be interesting to see how they look against Syracuse. I don't think Syracuse is any good, but Syracuse has had some wins over the years. They've been known to upset Clemson at times. I think that's going to be a fun game to watch. Then Boise State with Ashton Jeanty. Just want to see if this kid keeps rolling out.
Boise's only favorite 3.5. It's on the road, but 3.5 point favorite for Boise State in that one. So I think Vegas thinks it's going to be an interesting game.
Okay, Saturday. Washington at Indiana. Indiana is who we thought they were with a 56-7 win, at least who you thought they were.
Yeah. It was very impressive over Nebraska. Now, the issue that the quarterback's out. Quarterback injured his hand late in the first half against Nebraska. So he's out.
Out.
He's out. He's not playing this game.
Ooh.
Indiana's still favored by 6, though.
I have 6.5 on.
Yeah, 6.5. I'm showing that too. Yeah.
Or DraftKings. I have 6.5 on DraftKings. Okay. Listen, Washington is still a good enough team to beat Indiana. This is a possible game we pick. Here's one is on my radar. Notre Dame at Navy. Navy is undefeated and a 13-point dog at home. Look, Notre Dame has looked better than they have. Obviously, they lost to Northern Illinois. They didn't look great against A&M, but they beat A&M. However, Navy has looked very, very, very good. Kevin, I bet this is a potential game we pick, so you don't have to completely make a pick. But are you telling me there's no way in the world Navy can cover the 13?
No, I'm not saying that at all. Now, obviously, in the trenches, there's no competition here along the lines of scrimmage between.
But that's why Navy runs running the option.
Yeah, there are ways to offset that.
Yes,
by their scheme. And here's the thing: Notre Dame is going to have to play well.
Real quick, there was a talent gap in the trenches when they played Northern Illinois. That didn't seem to matter.
Yeah, my point in all this is saying that Notre Dame is going to have to play well. They can't play a D game and win.
I'm not sure they can play. I'm not sure they can play a B- game and win.
Yeah, they're going to have
Navy's
to
the
play well. They're going to have to. So it's not one of those ones where it's like, okay, we're better than them. Even if we play okay, so we can still win. They're going to have to bring it, and they're going to have to play well to beat Navy because again, Navy. We're talking about people who are going to be officers in the United States Navy. We're going to be going through crazy things and have been training for these kind of things. So they're not going to be intimidated by a Notre Dame football player, even if they're 6'5", 300 pounds.
Okay, this just occurred to me. And you tell me if I'm right. This is for both service academies. They can't really utilize the transfer portal, right?
You know what? No, I don't think so. I don't see how. I mean,
I don't think they
maybe,
can.
but you have to be eligible to enlist and go through basic training.
I don't think they can.
So I don't know how that works. So it doesn't seem like they can.
I say that though, that it allows them to go old school and develop players.
Yeah, and continuity within the roster.
And continuity within the roster, continuity within the system, a clear senior-led team, right? Because they're going to be there. I don't know, man. It's something to think about as to maybe why they're having some of the success that they're having at both service academies, because you can't lose a roster and you can't replace a roster. You know what I mean? All at the same. I don't know.
Yeah.
That just occurred to me. Anyway, we might pick that one. I like that matchup, but we'll come back to it. It's a top 25 matchup. Nebraska and Ohio State. Look, we thought Nebraska might be good. You can't go lose 56-7 to Indiana. I don't care how good Indiana is. Ohio State's a 25.5-point favorite. I don't know if Ohio State covers that. That's a big number, but I don't see a scenario where Nebraska can make this game close.
Yeah, I mean, you see the development is still happening in the program, right? And you're starting a true freshman quarterback. He is incredibly talented, but
3 interceptions against Indiana.
Yeah. It's growing pains. That's what happens when you have young quarterbacks out there. You know that. You're dealing with it now this season. Texas dealt with it with Quinn Ewers, so it's how it works. So, yeah, it's going to be tough for them to really get anything going, even if they play well. Ohio State is so good on both sides of the ball. It's hard to envision Nebraska honestly keeping this game close if Ohio State shows up and plays the style of football that we expect them to play, especially coming off that loss. They had a bye week last week, so we'll see how they respond. I'm sure they got a lot of pent-up frustration that they want
I was
to
about to say, probably you would think a bad spot to be
for Nebraska for sure.
For Nebraska. Switching to the SEC, a couple games in the SEC. Missouri at Alabama. Alabama's a 13.5-point favorite. I don't know what to think of this line. I don't think Missouri is who we thought they were. And now I'm not sure Alabama is who we think they are, having lost to Vanderbilt and Tennessee and a very close game against South Carolina. So Alabama's still the 13.5-point favorite. I'm not sure that line is where it needs to be, though. I think it could be closer to 10.
Yeah, they've got some issues on both sides of the ball. The defense hasn't been elite for Alabama, and that offense is struggling. They're not running the ball well, which honestly has been a thing at Alabama the last 2 years quietly, but they're not running it well, and they turn the ball over a couple times. So this is a pressure game for Kalen DeBoer. We didn't think he would have this kind of pressure this soon into it. The Vanderbilt lost. Well, I mean, there's pressure, but it's a different type of pressure now that you've lost. The Vanderbilt loss took away their margin of error for the rest of the season. So they're on thin ice on every game.
Well, hold on. Following Georgia, we were crowning Alabama.
Yeah.
Following Georgia, we're saying Alabama is the best team, and it might not be close. Like Kalen DeBoer,
no fallout. There's been no
Kalen
fallout.
DeBoer has unlocked an offensive giant. Kalen DeBoer has sculpted his offensive system around Jalen Milroe and made him an instant Heisman candidate. Like all those things were being said. And now we're going, can they beat Missouri? Right? I mean, it is this season
comes at you fast, man.
Oh,
you're trying to replace Nick Saban.
Undefeated BYU at Central Florida. Central Florida, though, a 1.5-point favorite at home. Florida State at Miami. Miami's a 21-point favorite. And Penn State, who I think is the number 3 team in the country right now, maybe number 2, at Wisconsin. 6.5-point dogs. One thing to note about this Wisconsin game is you get Tawee Walker, and with every successive game of success that he has, it just makes Oklahoma want to do the face plant palm thing to the forehead every time we see Tawee Walker's stats.
I just didn't realize he wasn't a scholarship guy
No.
at OU. Why?
No, and then he gets into fisticuffs with DeMarco Murray and kind of seals the deal. I'm wishing they would have made up at this point, though.
Yeah, it would have been nice because, what he offers is exactly what you need with these young quarterbacks. A guy you can just hand the ball out to 20 to 25 times a game and keep the chains moving.
Not afraid of contact.
Not
Would have dealt well with an offensive line that's struggling. Just a bowling ball kind of a running back that we just don't have right now. What do you think about BYU being an underdog at UCF? You think UCF showed enough in the near upset of Iowa State to warrant being a favorite?
They must have, and they must not like that road trip, that travel for BYU having to go down to Florida. That's all I can make of it because I haven't heard of any injuries or anything like that. So
I talked to former guest of the Boomer Bevo podcast, Joe Young, our resident BYU expert. And he said the rest of the country is learning what BYU has had to deal with since they became an independent, which is the long road trips in season. A lot of teams make long road trips in non-conference games, but legs are still fresh. Teams are still, kind of got a high energy level and all of that. But BYU, when they were an independent, they were constantly making these trips, zigzagging across the country, whatever the case may be. It's possible to say they're used to it, but still, man, when you got to go from west to east, you see it in the NFL all the time. Teams struggle, and I can't imagine it's any easier on college kids.
No, not at all, right? Who don't prioritize sleep, right? Kids are up all night anyway.
Now, BYU's kids are like, what you're worried about is it's BYU's kids, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
for real. But like USC,
they're having to deal with a wife and 3 kids and paying a minivan bill.
Yeah. USC has had to play at Minnesota and they've had to play at Maryland. I mean, no excuse for them losing that game, but those are long road trips.
Those are long road trips,
right? We talked about Miami having to play at Cal Berkeley and a conference game. We saw Stanford go all the way and play Clemson on the road. It's so weird. But it catches up to you after a while.
LSU at A&M, this is number 8 versus number 14. I think a little bit surprises for both that they're doing this well, that they're ranked this high. A&M's a 2.5-point favorite at home. I guess to put it in terms that you have been putting this in all year, which of these 2 teams is more serious, Kevin?
That's a really good question. I like what I've seen out of both of these teams over the past few weeks. LSU's got their offense going. Nussmeier, he's a baller. He's got no fear. And their running game has gotten going. The kid, Caden Durham, true freshman out of Duncanville. I know. I thought y'all were going to get him. Isn't he originally from Moore? I'm pretty sure he is.
He might be.
Oklahoma. I think he is. Be. So ends up at Duncanville, gets down to LSU, and man, he's unlocked. For me, he's unlocked their entire offense.
He looks good.
Running the ball.
He looks really, really good.
He was a guy, man. I could not understand why Texas did not recruit him heavier because he is a track guy. I mean, he's running on a relay team, 4x100 relay team that's setting all sorts of national records. So just show you the type of speed that he has, but he's a tough football player.
Yeah, he's a tough football player. Absolutely.
So
you don't think of him as a speed. You watch him, and he reminds me in an LSU uniform of like Clyde Hilaire.
Clyde
the last name.
Hilaire. Yeah.
Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. He looks a lot like him, Yeah. It's kind of that tough inside runner, but with a little bit of speed.
He's got home run.
Yeah.
Game-breaking speed. So, he's unlocked their entire offense, and their defense has been better, right? They're not 07 LSU as far as defense goes.
Few are.
But they get right, but they've been better defensively. And same with A&M, right? Defense has been good all year. It was good. Even in that loss against Notre Dame, the defense has been really good. That's what Elko does. You're seeing that the offense has been good. It's been efficient. It's been good. So this game is exciting, and we're talking about the two teams that are on top of the conference. So
Neither one of them have
whoever wins this game
neither
is
one of
sitting
them
in the
have a
driver's
loss.
seat.
Neither one of them have a loss of conference.
Correct.
These two are undefeated teams in conference.
Whoever wins this game, you would think has the inside track to playing for the conference title.
Auburn at Kentucky. Kentucky's a 2.5-point favorite. Kansas at KSU. KSU's a 10-point favorite. SMU at Duke. Cincy at Colorado, where Colorado's a 5.5-point favorite. And then the last ranked matchup is Illinois at Oregon. Illinois coming off the 21-7 win against Michigan. Oregon obviously coming off. I don't think they played last week, did they? Did they have a bye after the Ohio State game? I think they did.
Oregon? No, they played on Friday night against Purdue and just I think
that's right.
5-0.
Yeah, they rolled them. Never mind. Oregon's a 21.5-point favorite, though, hosting Illinois. Here's the deal, Kevin. We've got a number of games to pick. We're going to pick the OU game. We're going to pick the Texas game. We picked 3 other games. I'm going to give you those games, and you tell me what you want to pick. I'm going to pick one. I want Notre Dame Navy. I want to pick Notre Dame Navy.
We'll have to pick LSU and A&M.
You want LSU and A&M? Okay, so here's your other two. Here's your other choices. Washington at Indiana, Missouri at Alabama, Illinois at Oregon.
Right? We'll do Mizzou and Alabama, SEC game.
Mizzou and Alabama. Okay, let's start Notre Dame Navy. I've been on Navy's bandwagon from the beginning. I've been calling this a critical game here. Navy easily covers the 13 and might upset Notre Dame.
I hope that happens. I really
you're
hope
taking Notre Dame.
I would love to see that, but I'm taking Notre Dame to cover.
Wow, to cover the 13?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know, man. LSU at A&M. A&M is giving 2.5.
This one is tough, man, because I can see this game going either way, but I am going to go with Brian Kelly and LSU to win the game, which would obviously be a cover.
I'm taking LSU too because I can't imagine A&M doing anything to put them. They're just stupid. It's just a stupid fan base. Elko looks like an idiot coach. I think he's gotten lucky. I think the schedule's been pretty weak for him. It was a good win against Missouri, but I don't think Missouri is worth a flip. I like LSU.
We will say, though, that was pretty eye-opening. Again, that may say more about Missouri than it does about A&M, but that was an eye-opening game, no matter what it means. Here's what
it says about Missouri. It says Bama covers the 13.5 against Missouri. That's what it says. So I just said it.
Man, I keep believing, and I'm going to keep believing, man. I think Milroe gets back on track. And,
you like Bama too?
I like Bama too to cover.
Okay, we've got two pretty big lines for SEC games. The biggest underdog Oklahoma has been since 1997. That's an amazing statistic.
It really is.
It speaks to two things. It speaks to the level of play that Oklahoma has had in said period for them not to be an underdog of those proportions. Number two, it speaks to the fall from the perch that they've had over these past however many games. So Oklahoma, start with Oklahoma at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 20.5-point favorite. The over-under is 49, which tells you they don't think it's going to be a very high-scoring game despite the big spread. Does Oklahoma have a chance of covering the 20.5?
I think you do have a chance. I think there's a chance if your defense comes out fired up like it does, like we've seen them before, I think you can force a couple of turnovers early from Jackson Dart. Even if you convert those into field goals, that will allow you to keep the game close and that will allow you to cover. I don't see how the offense is going to score enough for you guys to win the game, but that is a way that you can keep this spread close. And I actually think you do it. I think you cover the spread. I think Ole Miss wins the game outright, but I actually think you cover it.
I am in a 1-0 win streak picking against Oklahoma, and I'm going to do it and try to make it 2 weeks in a row. I say Ole Miss covers the 20.5.
Okay.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope that this jinxes Ole Miss. I hope that all the things, but I'm writing it down that Ole Miss covers the 20 and a half. Vanderbilt at Texas, or Texas at Vandy, it's an 18 and a half point. Listen, I haven't seen anything from Vandy that says they can't keep this thing within 18 and a half. I'm not necessarily picking an upset, although with Vanderbilt, who the heck knows? But I think they can keep it within 18 and a half. I'm taking Vandy to cover.
I actually understand why you're doing that. I completely do, and I'm not going to argue with you on that. But I think that Texas is going to be motivated after the way that the game against Georgia went. I think we see a better performance out of Quinn Ewers. I think we get the running game back going against his defense, and I think our defense makes it tough for Pavia and crew. And I think Texas does win. I think we cover the spread.
All right. You are 19 and 22. I am 20 and 21. We need to get back on the right side of 500. I'm not sure that this is the week. This is some pretty tricky games, I think, to pick. It's some bigger spreads. You know what I mean? You can't just pick who you feel is going to win. LSU and A&M maybe is close enough that you're picking who's going to win. But outside of that, there's some pretty big spreads. I mean, look at even if we would have gone with Illinois and Oregon, that's 21 and a half points.
Yeah. It's a very interesting spreads this week. Real quick, I just want to say something about the SEC. I'm really enjoying being in this conference so far. Despite the loss to Georgia and the way your season is going, just the interaction with the SEC fan bases and just how petty they are, right? And I'm hearing Georgia fans who are like, oh, man, I went to Texas. The fans are horrible. I'm like, good. I'm glad you had a bad experience there. I love that. Right now, I don't like our fans throwing stuff on the field, but yeah, I don't want you guys to come and have a great time. I want you to be annoyed by our fan bases. No, real horrible behavior, but yeah, I don't mind being unliked by opposing fan bases.
Tennessee and South Carolina have come to Oklahoma, and they have both left saying how great an experience they've had. That's absolute crap.
Yeah.
Right? It is crap. What it means is we enjoyed kicking your ass. That's exactly what it means.
Yeah.
That's like when I went to Ohio State and said, what a great time I had at Ohio State. Yeah, because we won.
Yeah, but their fans were horrible. They were. The experience, the win was great and historic for you.
But that's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny because I was at the game and I was wearing neutral colors like I am now. And, I'm talking to South Carolina fans, telling them how good their edge rushers are. And they're just like, oh, great. They're probably thinking, oh, you fans are great. I'm like, yeah, I don't know you're a fan, but yeah.
No. Look, winning and losing is the reason. Now, I know Georgia went in and won. Nobody can go to Austin and say those are good fans. They're terrible fans. Texas has the worst fans. They're bandwagon fans. They're entitled fans.
Okay, the entitled part might be true, but the bandwagon is not true.
We've already talked about this. We established this last week. You are the most bandwagon-prone fan base in the entire country, okay? So you are bandwagon fans. You're entitled fans. You don't know anything about football. So I can acknowledge why nobody wants to go to Austin and watch football games.
So they want to go. They want to come and watch it because Austin is so great. They just don't like dealing with us, which I'm fine with.
Austin is a cesspool, Kevin. Austin is a cesspool. No. Austin's great. There's a reason you don't live in Austin. Dude, you and I grew up in San Antonio. Did you ever want to live in Austin?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Are you serious?
Nobody wants to live in. Dude, their traffic sucks.
The traffic does suck.
Their politics suck. The university dominates the entire city.
That is actually not true.
You should care about it. That's why the city sucks, Kevin.
That's not true.
That's why the traffic sucks.
The university actually does not dominate the city.
Oh, stop it.
That is why there's so many fans of opposing teams that live there.
There's so many fans of opposing teams that live there because they basically advertised to Southern California, come and take over our city.
I'm talking about regional. I'm talking about regional fans, regional teams.
Like what?
Austin is great. Oh man, there are Aggies all over Austin. There's Sooners all over Austin. Are you serious?
Whatever. I hate Austin. I hate Austin. I hate Texas. I hate the Texas fans. I'm glad Georgia had a terrible time.
I love the fact that our roles are reversing as programs, and you guys are becoming the bitter deal. And because I had a whole decade, and all I can be enjoyed about is when y'all would lose playoff games. Ha ha ha. Way to lose a playoff game coming from a fan of a team that never even sniffed one until last year. That's what we had for a decade. And I'm glad that we're just at least playing in games that matter. And the fact that, other people just want to see us lose, I love it.
I feel like you should have led with this because this kind of banter would have gotten us more views than just, going into Vandy owns a 3-8-1 record on you. I think you should have just led with people hate playing at Texas, and then I could have gone why, and we would have had more views. Is there any way to splice the tape, move it to the front, so people can understand how much I hate Texas and Austin?
Maybe
dude, nobody wants to live in Austin, dude. Nobody wants to live there.
Okay, just the population boom says otherwise. But,
dude, look.
Listen, man. You want a great college experience? You want to be somewhere where you never have to leave? Whereas most OU alums leave, they come back to visit. Most of them go to Dallas, go to Austin, go to other places. Yeah, our players still live there because it's a great city. Everything you want, everything you could want is there.
This conversation took a turn, and I think we should close it up before it gets out of hand. Austin does suck. We established it last week. You're a bandwagon fan base. I don't know why we have to keep revisiting it. And I hope Vanderbilt kicks your ass.
Hey,
that's
man.
all. I mean, I don't know what else I got for you today. I don't know what else I got for you.
100,000 in the stands to watch 5 and 7 teams. That's the kind of bandwagon we're on.
That's a good point. Y'all did see a lot of bad football for 10 or 11 years.
A lot.
I will grant. Fans that have stuck with you guys deserve a little bit of this. That is fine. That is fair. I pray to the gods of football that Oklahoma didn't do anything to deserve the same duration of suck that y'all have had to endure. I'm hoping that BV gets his turnaround. And you know what's funny is I'm hoping for Brent Venables more than I ever hoped for Lincoln Riley to do well. I want Brent Venables to do so. I like the guy so much. And that almost makes me wonder, is my judgment being clouded? You know what I'm saying? Am I being clouded by my affection for Brent Venables? I hope.
Well, again, and I'm not trying to say he's the same guy, but it feels familiar to the Charlie Strong era of Texas.
Oh, God.
His teams were, I don't know if y'all are going to go 5 and 7, right? But, he's just a great guy. Everyone likes him. And
where else?
has the same values of toughness.
Where else are we going to get it? Where else are we going to get a win, dude? Outside of Maine? Missouri, maybe. That game, I would feel better. Well, I was going to say I'd feel better about it if it was in Norman, but after what South Carolina did, we'll see, man. Hopefully, this for you guys, that offense brings a spark. But yeah, I'm feeling some of the same vibes as far as just everything else that goes into it. The roster, the offense, the offensive staff, the whole quarterback situation. Texas never could settle on one the whole time he was there. So listen,
we'll see.
This is something we can agree on. None of it's good. It's not where you want your program to be.
No,
you do not want your program going through coordinators. You don't want your program going through quarterbacks.
Yeah,
you just don't want it, and it sucks. All right, well, let's end on that. That's a great positive note. Kevin, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the week's worth of games. Boomer.
Hook 'em.